Toby Flenderson, 100% the Scranton Strangler. At least I think so. If you're watching this video saying, Nathan, you've already talked about this. You already had a video over a year ago about this subject. You are correct, but let me introduce you to the law of copyright. Specifically when you're using NBC material, because they do not like that. In fact, they don't like it so much that to get back at you, they're gonna take that theory and upload it on their own channel. But here's the thing. There are so many videos on this topic, I figured I still need to talk about this. I need to make sure that my thoughts are being represented on YouTube. And so I'm going to play their game. I'm using no video clips for this entire theory. Before we jump into Toby's character, let's jump into some specific traits that are just sketchy to say the least. Season 2, Casino Night. He quotes that it feels good taking money from Michael. I'm going to chase that feeling. He's then accused to be several things. In Phyllis's wedding, Kevin alludes to the fact that he may have hired a prostitute as his date. Michael accuses him of possibly being the flasher that flashed Phyllis. And while Toby uses the phrase, the silent killer, Michael turns to him and says, you are the silent killer, only to have Toby turn to the camera and say, you'll see. In season 6, you can see him teaching Pam how to throw a punch. In season 9, he even threatens to kill Clark. And then there's just the random hobbies, like his mystery novel that he's writing about someone who turns up being a murderer. And also, he wants to launch a true crime podcast called The Flenderson Files. So all that's very odd behavior, to say the least. But now let's look at his history and look at his life to see what led him up to this point. First, he dropped out of seminary to be married to Kathy, only later to be divorced by her, and now he has a daughter who hardly loves him from what we know. This causes him to live a very pitiful life, especially due to the fact that he is constantly obsessed with Pam. Pam has a direct correlation to the storyline of the Scranton Strangler, and here's why. During the earlier seasons, we can see Toby continuing to make an effort to try to get with Pam. Finally, when he finds out that this is just not going to work, he leaves for Costa Rica to try to get away from her. While he's in Costa Rica, he experiences a neck injury, and that neck injury is crucial because that is going to be the inspiration for his future killings. So jump forward, Toby comes back, and he's still somewhat obsessed with Pam, but also living a very sad life. And in season 6, this is the first mention we get of the Scranton Strangler. It happens during the birth of Cece. And if you notice, during that birth, many members of the office are there in the hospital, except for Toby. While it makes sense Toby would not want to be there while Pam's having a kid, it's too much of a coincidence for me that it's also the day that the Scranton Strangler strikes. Hearing the phrase, the Scranton Strangler strikes again, alludes to the idea that he's done this before. So what this tells me is that Pam must be a trigger for Toby, and when she was giving birth, he struck again. When was the first time? Was it when they got engaged, when they announced they were pregnant, when they got married? Who knows? But to give more evidence for this, let's look at the next story in the Strangler's timeline, and that is when he gets caught. So this episode opens up with the whole office watching the Strangler being chased by the police, except one person isn't there. And that's Toby. And the other odd thing about this scene is that it's Toby's computer that is watching this. So here's how I think it went down. I believe that Toby was watching the stream, found out that the police thought they had the Strangler, so he left the office to try to see if it was at his house. When he rushed away, he must have left the live stream on his computer, and the whole office decided to gather around and watch it. Next, I believe that when Toby realized the police were chasing the wrong person, he called back at the office to try to get an update from them. The reason I believe this is because Toby's phone rings. Michael just picks it up and hangs it up because they're too busy watching this. Because if it was a call to the office, it would have gone through Aaron, who would have forwarded it, but Aaron was there with the whole office. So therefore, this call was specifically to Toby. And obviously there are other people in this world that could have called Toby's phone, but it's too much of a coincidence to me that it was called at that moment. The next key about this scene is the car that was being chased. As you can see, this green car not only appears in this scene, but also in the office parking lot in another episode. Now there are at least 2 other cars that we see Toby drive in this series. So here is how I assume the events went down. In season 2, he owned a car, and when he decided he wanted to become the Strangler, he got a new car specifically so it wouldn't match his old car. And then when he eventually gave up being the Strangler, he got a new car. But I'll talk more about him not being the Strangler a little later. The last part about this scene is the line that Dwight says. And he says this chase is just going to inspire copycats. And the ironic part about that line is that the person the police were chasing was actually a copycat. So now that we know how the capture happened, let's go into the next part, and that's the trial and guilt. So in season 7, after the Strangler is captured, we learn that Toby is going to be on the jury for the Strangler, which is such a big coincidence that someone in the office, an office that was obsessed with this case, how someone got placed on that jury. There's probably a whole other theory to be said about how Toby got in that position, but for now, it's just too big of a coincidence for me to just push it to the side. So while he's on the jury, they announce that George Howard Scub is the Scranton Strangler. But then all of a sudden, during Michael's last Dundee, something happens, and Toby announces to the entire office that he doesn't believe that George Howard Scub is the Strangler. So why is that? And why for the next 2 seasons does Toby keep bringing this up and feeling guilty about it? Finally, in season 9, Toby just says, I need to visit this person. So him and Nellie go to the prison to do that. While he's at the prison, we don't know what kind of conversation went down, but we do know that Toby comes out being strangled. So here's how this works a little too perfectly. Toby walks in there, admits to George Howard Scub that he really is the Scranton Strangler. George loses it, strangles Toby, giving Toby the perfect reason to continue to accuse George Howard Scub, and Toby is completely innocent in this, but it also gives Toby a taste of his own medicine. And once he is able to leave that prison, he's able to move on and leave this all behind. I'm sure this guilt is still going to sink in with him, but the fact that these killings started off with a neck injury in Costa Rica and ended with another neck injury in the prison is the perfect story arc for the Scranton Strangler. And here's where this adds even more depth to this story. When Toby leaves for Costa Rica, that is the reason that Holly comes to the office and meets Michael. And when the Scranton Strangler is on trial, Toby leaves to be on the jury, and that's the reason Holly comes back and eventually gets engaged and marries Michael. Michael himself thanks the Scranton Strangler because of the fact that Holly is coming back. So not only is it hilarious that the one person that Michael hates most in this world is the person he is thanking, but also the fact that because Jim pursued Pam, and Pam turned down Toby, and Toby went to Costa Rica and became the Strangler, and the Strangler eventually brought Holly back, Michael has to thank Toby for Holly. So what do you think? Is this a closed case? Because whoever's running the Office YouTube page sure thinks so. Comment below, let me know what you think. I appreciate you guys watching another video of me rambling about Toby Flenderson. And if you like this video, don't forget to give it a like, subscribe for more content like this, and of course, I will see you next time.